Hello and most welcome to age 850, 1850 to be correct. Already, all of a sudden, 1,000 disappeared. We are getting closer to the 2000.
Hooray! Hooray!
Hooray, hooray, hooray. Isn't that glorious? We will today continue the previous lecture by Jorunn Okland, The Spectre Revealed and Made Manifest. It's from the book The World Ends, by The Way the World Ends, edited by John Lyons and Jorunn Okland. And we left off at page 281. And last time we went into how important for meaning to be that it has materiality. It is based in our doings, our actions. Otherwise, it will have little or no meaning. And we also looked into how many different metonyms are used by Marx Engels, both from Revelation and from the surrounding. We put some emphasis in the penultimate lecture of Zurich and Zion for her Herzl. This goes to show, for something to be real, it needs to be firmly put into the ground or the bedrock of reality. Otherwise, it will lack meaning, it will have little effect. It will be like the Hegelian thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It sort of covers everything. There is no room for creativity. Everything is predetermined in that. And it will also make meaning disappear. Meaning that the word carries something, is dependent on an open-ended future past. In the determinate worldview, you will become less active, you become passive. In the discussion, we hinted a bit towards a difference between Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Engels continued a bit and was sure to gain more influence from the Darwinian worldview than Karl Marx would have been infused in. It is not unfair, I would say, that the Darwinian worldview is an amplification of the determinate feature of Newtonian physics. It becomes even more fixated. in time and space and understanding. It's, one could say, the future has already happened if we go to Darwin. So I continue my read with Engels, page 281. 8. Engels on the history of early Christianity. The essay on the history of early Christianity is a more extensive text that repeats and develops further many of the themes from the one previously discussed, which shows how Engels's interest in the parallels between the social movement and primitive Christianity continued to grow throughout his life. At this point, he is ready to respond to Anton Menger, who wondered why socialism did not follow the slave working class overthrow of the Roman Empire. That it actually did. Only under a different name. Kalle, could we have the text a little bit further down? Just a bit. Here, I'm standing up. Down the other direction. Yeah, perfect. Yes, perfect. No, it didn't have to be that much. I think we can make it, maybe try to make it a bit smaller. Yeah, that is perfect. Do continue with your nice comments. They cheer up the article. Socialism did, in fact, as far as it was possible at that time, exist and even became dominant in Christianity. Only this Christianity, as was bound to be the case in the historic conditions, did not want to accomplish the social transformation in this world, but beyond it, in heaven, in eternal life after death, in the impending millennium. Thus, the book of Revelation becomes a key text, and all later European revolutionary movements only variations of an early Christian theme. I have quoted from the introduction to this work already in order to illustrate Engels's interest in both historical critical scholarship and in early Christianity as a phenomenon. Having taken the opportunity to argue with Bruno Bauer noch einmal, but much more sympathetically this time, Engels concludes that the truth about early Christianity cannot be defined on the basis of the sources available in 19th century Germany. That is the New Testament. He is certain that the new discoveries in Rome, Egypt, and the Orient will contribute more knowledge in the future than any critical reading of the existing sources. This in contrast to historical critics such as Bauer and Strauss. Engels does, however, make an exception for the book of Revelation. He states, but we have in the New Testament a single book, the time of writing, which can be defined within a few months, which must have been written between June 67 and January or April 68. A book, consequently, which belongs to the very beginning of the Christian era and reflects with the most naive fidelity and in the corresponding diplomatic, idiomatic language, the ideas of the beginning of that era. In this book, therefore, in my opinion, is a far more important source from which to define what early Christianity really was than all the rest of the New Testament.
Wow.
Which in its present form is of a far later date. He thus repeats much of what he said in 1883. Stresses even more the book of Revelation's uniqueness as a window into the historical situation and mentality, but also emphasizes more strongly the genre to which it belongs, the apocalypses. All the apocalypses attribute to themselves the right to deceive their readers, says Engels.
Deceive.
They prophesy things that have already happened, and they are consistently pseudepigraphical. In his great poverty of mind, and as Professor Bennery demonstrated in the lectures Engels attended, the author of the book of Revelation has borrowed every picture from previous apocalypses. But Engels is clearly tempted to change his view on the authorship question yet again and again.
Oi, oi, oi. What did he say now?
For if the Apostle John really were to be the author,
Really?
that could be the best confirmation
Oi.
that the Christianity of this book is real, genuine, early Christianity.
Oi, oi, oi. Stamp of approval.
Thus, we see Engels's interest is to boost even further the book of Revelation as the most authentic voice of primitive Christianity and closest to the origin.
Origin.
And here it came. Then follows a basic outline of the content of the biblical book, where he points out all the instances where it does not fit with the dogmas of Christianity that came about later in the intellectualizing unifying interpretatio Greca of the movement.
Movement.
again, his survey of the content of the book of Revelation is too familiar to be interesting in our context. But this is in itself slightly suspicious.
Suspicious. Selkomus again.
Given that he wrote over 100 years ago. What strikes me as a New Testament scholar then is how many of Engels's views that were probably rather extreme in his own time are 100 years later explored as newish perspectives in mainstream New Testament scholarship.
Wish. Wish.
I am especially thinking of the idea of early Christianity as a conglomerate of sects along a spectrum between traditional Judaism, Greek materialism, and Roman paganism. And that Orthodox, primitive Christianity was a retrospective construct of 4th and 5th century imperial Christianity.
Retrospective. Retro.
Also, the nature of the theology of the book of Revelation has been more noted in scholarship since the 80s. A few further points deserves to be mentioned. In his interpretation of Revelation 14 and the 144,000,
144,000, yes.
Engels takes the number as an expression of modesty.
Modesty.
It is a small number reflecting an author who feels one is struggling against the whole world, but with a strong determination to win.
Win.
That was how little our author was aware in the year 69 of the Christian era that he represented quite a new phase in the development of a religion which was to become one of the most revolutionary elements in the history of the human mind.
Mind. Mind.
Engels also points out that the heavenly paradise does not open to all, nor to the faithful by the mere fact of the death.
Yes. Yeah.
Entrance to the New Jerusalem must be struggled for and conquered, and the enemies to be conquered are none other than the powers of hell.
Hell.
9. Early and late. Originally, I intended my contribution to this volume to be a comparison between the book of Revelation's New Jerusalem and the Marxist notion of the classless society, with the aim to point out the structural similarities, historical connections, and to trace the afterlife of the book of Revelation in later Marxists, especially Benjamin and Bloch, to claim that Marx's and Engels's view of historical progress and development was influenced by the book of Revelation would be too risky.
Influence.
The connection is definitely there, but so is the connection between their view of historical progress and Hegel's dialectics, von Holbach's view of causality, and the purpose and aim of existence. To mention just a few. I still hope to return to Benjamin Bloch and apocalypticism for the end of days. but I ended up elsewhere for now in a much closer reading of Marx's and Engels's texts. First, because of my disappointment with what was done in the 1970s in terms of Marxism and Bible. It was so much about showing how the two were, excuse me, or were not compatible philosophically and ethically. And so little about actually taking the texts seriously.
Seriously.
Those by Marx and Engels, and those by biblical authors. The various quotes, they're commenting on Marx's and Engels's notorious silence about what a future society would actually look like, are very strongly confirmed in the writings I've analyzed. If we take the example from the Communist Manifesto, also mentioned above, it even seems as if the attempt to describe the New Jerusalem will inevitably be a reduction of it, as if the via negativa is only one way to remain faithful to it, while keeping all the focus on the struggle here and now. The writings I have analyzed fall into two distinct periods. The early writings from the mid-1840s and the very late writings from the hand of Engels. Both written around and after the death of Marx. During the 40 years in between, the particular interpretation of socialism had won. There was no longer any point in arguing with other thinkers holding close but not identical positions to themselves. Socialism, which in the 1840s was still a multifaceted phenomenon, had turned into a distinct movement that had lessons to learn from similar movements in history. The situation set apart by 40 years color the two sets of texts differently.
Differently. I did it.
But there are also differences between the writings that come mainly from the pen of Marx and those from Engels. It seems that while Engels's approach to the book of Revelation was historical, he studied it at university, was well read, and was able to enter historical, critical, scholarly discussions over content and interpretation. Marx's approach was aesthetic and allegorical.
Allegorical.
The book of Revelation was applicable form and rhetoric, and damn good as such, and had to be filled with new content in order to be useful in a new period. Engels the Elder wanted to teach the socialist movement lessons from history, wanted to understand the key to success, but the young Marx wanted to persuade. If the religion is opium to the people, one simply has to offer better opium. One might be tempted to suggest. I do like that phrase. I think that's a good. Yeah, I think we paused there. One might be tempted to suggest. So suggest.
Suggest. Page 12 in PDF.
What page number do we have?
Let me see. 285. 285.
285.
285.
I think we actually started with the word suggesting, if I'm not misnoming. I'll have a check. I can check.
No, we ended with perspectives the last time, and we began with the essay.
Okay. Maybe it was in Goldfarb suggesting turned up. There is an interesting connection here, but I would start with what page is this? It's an Engels quote. It's going on to the left column quote. Yeah, it's actually on that page, 282. You have the number, I don't have. You go down a bit, it's the second quote there. Yeah, there you are. Stop there. But we have in the New Testament a single book, the time of the writing of which can be defined within a few months. Between June 67 and January or April 68. A book, consequently, which belongs to the very beginning of the Christian era and reflects with the most naive fidelity and so on. I focus here with Engels's interest in classical dating. He dates it the classical way, as a determinate position in time. And it's probably not the only reason, but he is under the era of Darwinism, where determinism and time plays a much greater role than we would find, for instance, in Karl Marx. So we go from a certain openness in Karl Marx. He is also referred to the more emotional, he calls his thing a better opium. No, that was the author, but it's still a very good summary of what Karl Marx is about, the more open-ended one. Engels's is much more into the determinate, fixated. We can see that even more on the next column. Go to the next page, actually, even. He wants to go to the second sentence on the page there. Thus, we see Engels's interest is to boost even further the book of Revelation as the most authentic voice of primitive Christianity and closest to the origin. He wants to go to the origin. It's this obsession with what usually the person afflicted by that tendency call origin or authentic. It's very similar to the Platonic ideal. Not of this world, something otherworldly that is more authentic. And he gives Revelation that credit by Newtonian timing, Newtonian way of looking at time, vastly amplified by Darwinism, by the time of writing this that was firmly established in the thinking. it's a cause and effect. So it goes from the origin to the copy, to the next copy, and so on ad infinitum. And you will never, ever reach the origin. Is it in this mentioning, is it the thought in the author? Is it his penmanship, the ink in his plume? Or is it his mother who brought him to be born? I'd say it goes all the way to Big Bang, and in Darwinism, it goes all the way to the first form of life, one life form, which every life form on Earth is related to. And another interesting thing further down on the same page, what could that be? It's the second paragraph, and it's about 10 lines down, beginning with I am. Yeah, that's the one. And she wants to see the setting. And I pointed a setting out as well when it comes to Engels, but here it's explicit settings. It's the doing of the left hemisphere. Listen to this. I am especially thinking of the idea of early Christianity as a conglomerate of sects along a spectrum between traditional Judaism, Greek materialism, and Roman paganism, and that Orthodox primitive Christianity was a retrospective construct of 4th and 5th century imperial Christianity. All these things are explicit. You can read about them. That's the left hemisphere that assumes that all effects, all of circumstances can be talked about, that can be pointed out. It is also classical physics, because remember Laplace, who said that everything in the universe is open to calculation. It is potentially out there. Just give me all the coordinates in the universe and I can tell you the next step. It's the fantasy of explicitness. A very little part of reality is explicit. It's infinitesimal, very microscopical. It's pico. Quantum physics prove that the implicit, the thing we cannot talk about, is what determines. That is the quantum relation, not explicit things. They are merely the tip of the icebergs, and they do not lead to an understanding other in the view of a sort of cause and effect, where Judaism, what I can read about it, not the human acting, the flesh and blood, the buildings, nothing of that, nothing of the history. But what I, as a reader, can read about it, that's it, or what I heard. That would be 1/1,000,000th of a percentage of what traditional Judaism is. It is still very local reality to that instance. It's assumed that superficial features are, and using this cause and effect thing instead of a complex quantum relationship. and the doings. And we can go to the interesting connection here on the next page. It's too good to be true. You can stop there. Cheers. Thank you, Kalle. And it's about, let's see, it's the 5th line, I think. The connection is definitely there, but so is the connection between their view of historical progress and Hegel's dialectics. We mentioned that before. And now it comes von Holbach's view of causality.
Wow.
And the purpose and aim of existence, to mention just a few. It's too good to be true. Von Holbach would be in French, Dolbach. And one of the first writers on materialism. It is just an amazing circumstantial, synchronistic thing here. And here, I would have mentioned causality anyway, but here it is written out. Isn't it amazing? Von Holbach and this Dolbach has been mentioned so many times in our previous lectures. I think you remember that, Kalle.
Yes, absolutely.
His book from 1770, I think, the first claim that there is no free will and there is no God. And I think it still had the mentioning of soul. One could see here in this development how the cogs are getting stricter, and we reach this. We don't reach it, but we're walking towards the enslavement that we mentioned in 1849. Everything completely determinate. Everything ruled by cause and effect. And the causes being different cogs, like Judaism or early Christianity or Greco-Roman paganism, and they lead to a definite fixation in the end. And to make that even stronger, the lack of flexibility and movement, we add Newtonian time there with its linearity. Although, as I said, and we discussed in the previous lecture, all relations in the universe are non-linear. They do not follow that linear idea of progress. The past will affect the future, but also the future affects the past to the same level. It is quantum relation. Vive Carlo Rovelli! Hooray!
Yes, the relation of quantum physics of Carlo Rovelli.
I can especially recommend Helgoland here for an introduction, although quantum relation is not mentioned that much in that book. It's a very good start. The other Carlo, Kalle, please come in.
Thank you. Let me continue this very same page 284. And here Jorunn Okland is speaking about scholarship made in 1970s about Marxism and the Bible.
Oh yeah.
And then Jorunn Okland complains that these scholars of the 1970s were not taking the text seriously. I'm emphasizing the word seriously. We have, of course, Derrida. He published, when did he publish his book, Spectres of Marx? Let me refresh my mind. It's actually the French title.
Spectres of Marx, you mean, or?
Yes, when did Derrida put specters? Oh, okay, it gives me now the English version, but okay, let me put it. Did it appear? It's the 1993. Okay, it's much later, of course. Specters Marx. Yes, indeed. Editions Galilei, 1993. Okay. Now, my point is that, for instance, Derrida, there is a lot of joking, so he didn't really take seriously within quotation marks.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're getting at, yeah.
And also Wittgenstein, he has this term language game. To take the idea of game very not seriously. And from here, I would like to take Wittgenstein to something. Yes, this line I think was very good. So Engel emphasizes more strongly the genre to which it belongs, the apocalypse.
Yeah.
All the apocalypses attribute to themselves the right to deceive their readers, says Engels. They prophesy things that have already happened, and they are consistently pseudo-epigraphical. That is, they falsely claim to written they are falsely claimed to be written earlier than they actually are. So that is pseudo-epigraphical, that they are attributed to somebody else, but in this case, books that are actually written after the events, but they claim that they in the book they claim that they were written earlier. If you get my point.
Ah, okay.
After the fact, so to say. Let's say that the book of Revelation was written, even though here the word is not so appropriate, because Engels says that it was written around 67, and we have the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Then it actually predicts the fall of Jerusalem in 3 years later, so to say. But if it were truly pseudo-epigraphical, the author of the book of Revelation would claim to be written in the 60s before the fall of Jerusalem, but in reality it would be written, let's say, in 90s during the reign of Domitian. Get my point?
Yeah.
So to say, predicting 20 years
Microphone.
later the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. In that sense, it's pseudo-epigraphical, claiming to be written earlier than they are.
Oh. Very good.
So what is my point here? And to return
microphone, Kalle. Microphone.
What is my point here? I return to Wittgenstein. So Wittgenstein points out that we should not ask what is. So here Engels is actually asking what is the apocalypse. So here Engels is falling into the trap asking what is the apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
And then when you ask that from question, what is the apocalypse, then you already in the next step, the next from conclusion, all the apocalypses attribute to themselves the right to deceive their readers.
Yeah. And it's very good. I also have to add that predicting the past from the future is actually much more difficult. We know that from quantum mechanics.
Can you give you an example? What do you mean?
In quantum mechanics, half of the work is predicting what is the past. So even the word, I can't even pronounce it, pseudo-epigraphical, in reality, in the physical reality, it doesn't mean anything, because half of the work in quantum mechanics is to predict what is past.
Yes, indeed. The Wheeler and Witt equation done in the 70s proves that.
Yeah, there is a naivety in the classical physics that we can only predict the future. And that idea is still alive. It's very far from the case. It's extremely naive, and it doesn't make any sense either. What would it mean that the past is an accumulation of past events, and they should be glued together with cause and effect, like some sort of super glue? And together with the Big Bang, or whatever, the first life form on Earth, they will create the future somehow. Oh my God, no. Then we have Laplace all over again.
Let me only comment on one last thing. It's here beginning from the last line on the same page. But Engels is clearly tempted to change his view on the authorship question yet again.
Oh yeah.
And then it continues here on page 283. For if the Apostle John really were to be the author, that would be the best confirmation that Christianity of this book is real, genuine, early Christianity.
It's beautiful. I missed that one.
So here, although Jorunn Okland in one way criticizes that his English is very extreme, okay, that's true, but he's only taking the conclusions that were available to him according to 19th century scholarship. He's taking them to their extreme conclusions.
Yeah.
Or rather, English is very pedagogical. He's very pedagogical. He can explain what the issue is.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Although he's misled, but he's very good teacher, so to say. So if John is the author, that is the best confirmation that this is really genuine. Here, so Engels has changed his mind. John must be the author. And therefore, since he was one of Jesus' closest apostles, then this is a genuine work. We can trust this. This is the right true Christianity stamp on this stamp of approval.
And I guess you see the connection also between the idea of the Big Bang and what is now. So the Big Bang is the origin that causes everything. And that's why we are here now. I can stand here 2023, the 7th of October at 12:45 and talk, and all my molecules are arranged according to that first origin.
And now I want to say something very important about today's apologetics. So there are Christians today who defend the New Testament, its reliability, by trying to prove, within quotation marks, to prove that the books were written really by the authors. Let's say Matthew's Gospel. Matthew's Gospel is really written by Matthew, and Mark really by Mark, and so forth.
Yeah.
And these Christians, they are of course well-intentioned. They have good intentions.
Yeah.
And atheists or agnostics, they do the opposite. They try to say that Matthew didn't really write Matthew, and so forth. But these Christians, even though they are well-intentioned, they have very good intentions, they're undermining themselves in one way.
Those are the ones who's undermining Christianity. I would say they are the most important underminer.
Since they actually do what Engels is doing here, but with different reasons.
Yeah, definitely.
So what we could say to these well-intentioned Christians of today is that they should study Wittgenstein quantum physics. And yes, it doesn't matter too much if John really wrote the book. I believe it personally, yes, but for many complicated reasons that I will not give here today. But it's not a question of...
As you say, Kalle, who is the original John? If I say John wrote this book, or somebody in the 15th century said John wrote this book, what does that mean? That person is using the word John in an apt and a correct way. There is no more correct way of using the word John. It doesn't make any sense at all. It's like saying that all people been using the expression John for the wrong reasons for 1,000 years. No language doesn't fail. The wrong is to ask the question in the wrongful way. Who is the most original John? And then you will end up in all sorts of nonsense. Is John's hand the original? Or is it his thought inside his head, or the molecule in his fingertip that put the writing on the paper, and so on and so on and so on. Reductio ad absurdum.
Indeed. And we saw yesterday of this kind of reasoning from Brian Greene, one of the leading physicists.
Yeah, we did it, didn't we? Yeah.
Yes.
That was also a good one.
Brian Greene is a firm believer in determinism.
Well, he's even worse than that. He's a victim of it, poor guy, because we don't ponder about these things normally. They are very hard to talk about because most of it is implicit. But I would say that people like Warren Goldfarb and Wittgenstein and Francis Lynn, they do make a very good effort to help us, I'd say. Maybe a good time to end. What do you say, Kalle?
Yes, we could end. I could, since this is so funny, I could read it again, this last phrase.
Yeah, please.
For if the Apostle John really were to be the author, that would be the best confirmation that the Christianity of this book is real, genuine, early Christianity.
Very good ending. Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening in, and have a very pleasant morning, day, afternoon, or wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you.